Long before the golden age of Athens, early Greek thinkers tried to explain the universe through a single variable, basic matter. They argued that everything, from the tides to a temple, was the result of blind collisions between unshaped fibers of earth, water, air, and fire. But Socrates and Plato found this strict materialism insufficient. They observed that the random movement of atoms fails to account for the presence of cosmic order or the existence of intelligent design. If matter alone cannot explain the stars, it certainly cannot explain the human being. Consider the difference between a living body and a freshly deceased corpse. Chemically, they are identical. Both possess the same quantity of flesh, blood, and bone. If the physical matter and the spatial shape remain unchanged at the moment of death, what variable accounts for the transition from a living subject to an inanimate object? To bridge this gap, classical philosophy introduces the concept of the formal cause, or the form. When applied to human beings, the Greeks used a specific term for this formal cause, the psyche, or the soul. This creates a mechanical mystery. We must ask what this soul is and how it interfaces with a physical, biological body. The problem is most evident in our ability to think. We need to explain how a biological, material brain can perceive eternal, immaterial laws like those found in mathematics. Solving this requires us to evaluate the two greatest competing models in history, Plato's transcendent soul and Aristotle's immanent form. Plato's model begins with a strict division. He posits that the human soul is an eternal, self-moving entity that exists independently of the body it inhabits. In the Phaedrus, he describes the soul as a divine pilot. The intellect acts as a charioteer, struggling to control two winged horses that represent our physical passions and desires. This soul does not originate in the material world. It pre-exists the body in a celestial realm, where it views the perfect, unchanging truth of the forms. Eventually, the soul loses its wings and descends to earth. It becomes trapped in a terrestrial human shell, which Plato views as a temporary, mortal prison for an immortal passenger. This dualism explains our grasp of mathematics. Our physical senses only see objects that are constantly changing, so they cannot be the source of our knowledge regarding perfect, unchanging geometric truths. Plato argues that learning is actually recollection. When we understand a mathematical proof, the soul is simply remembering the eternal truths it observed before its physical birth. In the Timaeus, Plato describes how this divine soul is tethered to the mortal body. He identifies the brain and the spinal marrow as the specific physical anchors designed by the gods to bind the eternal soul to our decaying mortal frame. For Plato, the human person is a divine prisoner. We are exiled intellects using a material vessel, striving to remember our way back to a higher reality. Aristotle, Plato's most brilliant student, rejected this division between the ghost and the machine. In his Metaphysics, Aristotle argues that a form cannot exist apart from the material object it defines. He proposes hylomorphism, the idea that a thing's identity is the result of matter and form working as a single unit. A house is more than a pile of mud and bricks. It is those materials organized into the functional structure of a dwelling. In De Anima, Aristotle defines the soul as the first actuality of a living body. Aristotle defines form as a functional organization, distinct from simple physical geometry. In this diagram of a tool, the material cause consists of wood and bronze, but the formal cause is the specific act of cutting. If the tool loses its capacity to chop, it is no longer an axe, except in name only. Aristotle uses this exact analogy in his text, stating, "If an axe were an animal, its soul would be its cutting." When we apply this functional model back to biology, the soul is no longer an alien pilot. The human soul is the organization of the body's physical parts. It is the very act of living, breathing, and perceiving. This explains the corpse. A dead body is only a human homonymously. It has the shape of a person, but it lacks the organizing function that constitutes life. For Aristotle, the soul is the biological operating system. It is the internal principle that makes a specific arrangement of matter a functioning human being. But if the soul is just a biological operating system, we return to our problem with mathematics. How can a physical system process abstract, infinite concepts? Biological organs are subject to decay and change. A material structure that is constantly in flux cannot act as the container for perfectly unchanging truths. Aristotle addresses this through a specific exception to his biological model, the nous, or the intellect. He argues that while our biological functions die with the body, the highest level of intellect has no physical organ. The nous functions independently of our biological tissue. Aristotle claims in A Genelation of Animals that this intellect enters the human from the outside, moving like ether. It is not a product of the body's organization. This makes the nous unique. Because it is independent of material decay, it is capable of grasping the eternal laws of the universe. Even Aristotle, the functionalist, had to concede that our ability to understand eternity requires a transcendent spark within the mind. These two models provide the foundation for how we understand ourselves today. Plato presents the human as an exiled intellect. We are immortal passengers using a material vessel to return to a higher realm of forms. Aristotle presents a hylomorphic unity. We are an integrated reality where matter and functional form are one. Their methods of explaining our origins differ, but they share the same starting point. Despite Aristotle's departure from his teacher's specific mechanics, both thinkers reached a shared conclusion: pure materialism cannot account for the complexity of human biology or the precision of mathematical thought. Their models demonstrate that human consciousness requires a formal cause to provide an architecture for experience that biological matter alone cannot provide. To be human is to possess a formal organization that allows a material creature to look past the physical world and grasp eternity.